Hello, welcome, and this is the Youth Roundtable on Civic Space TV by the Center for Constitutional Governance. My name is Nancy Caroline Ayot. I am your host. On this show, we amplify youth voices and unpack issues shaping governance and democracy across Africa and the world over. Today, we will turn our attention to Tanzania, a nation often hailed for its stability, but is now under scrutiny over the state of its governance following recent general elections. From the contested results and restrictions on opposition activity to the shifting dynamics of civic engagement, Tanzania's political landscape raises critical questions about where East Africa stands on democratic governance. As youth across the region increasingly demand for accountability, transparency, and participation, it is vital that we assess what these elections mean for the future of democracy, not only in Tanzania, but across East Africa. To help unpack this, we are joined by a vibrant panel of young leaders and analysts who bring diverse perspectives on governance, civic freedoms, and regional cooperation. I would like to welcome this panel to the show, and I'll start introducing them. From my extreme left coming in, we have our regular panelist and lawyer, Kwesigwa Emmanuel. Kwesigwa, welcome to the Youth Roundtable.
Thank you, Nancy, for having me, and always I'm delighted to be part of these minds to discuss this important.
Thank you very much. We have Banduni Jackson, who is a governance commentator and a director of studies at Cedar Hill School. Jackson, welcome to the Youth Roundtable.
I'm glad to be on this panel. Thank you so much, Nancy.
Yes. And then we have Kanyi Rachel Peace, who is a human rights activist. Kanyi, welcome to the Youth Roundtable.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm glad to be part of the show.
How does it feel to be the only woman on the panel?
I think when I feel I'm big, but I'm feeling sweet because I feel sweet to sit among these gentlemen.
Okay. Then we have Luwahano, Hosea, a youth leader and author. Welcome to the Youth Roundtable.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be here.
Yes, and Hosea, I would like to begin this conversation with you right away.
All right.
So, you know, from the days of independence, has Tanzania always had issues with its governance, or what we read is what or what is portrayed to us is what is true in Tanzania, and this is a big shift?
I think Tanzania has been a bit stable. But that can also be seen maybe from us who are outside from the lenses. We may think it is stable, yet people inside, they may be feeling something else. Because from 1961, that is Julius Nyerere. You may take it that Tanzania has been under one party. That is Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM. From 1961 now coming to where we are, it is one party. Now that means, literally you may think, because they've been having presidents changing and changing all over and all over, you may think there has been democracy moving from one person to another. But most times when you're having one party which is that strong enough and has kept power from 1961 to present date, sometimes there is an invisible hand which is having that power. And for you may see these faces changing, but literally there is an invisible hand which is in control of the state. You see now these countries differ. For example, in East Africa, when you want to consider Uganda and Kenya, Uganda from 1962 when we had Obote come into power, then 1966 crisis, then you've been having coups and you're having change of power through the gun. Now you're having the present government which came in through change by the gun. That means for them now you're having new faces which are hard on power. Then in Kenya, when you had Kanyi into power, 1963, for them, they have been changing, but still, people in the government changing. You're from Kenyatta, you go to Moi, then Kibaki, then you're having Uhuru Kenyatta, then now you have Uhuru. You have Ruto. Now, these people, they can check each other. They can check. Because now, Uhuru has left power, but has left some people inside the government. Literally, can check the power of Ruto. Now we come to Tanzania, you're having one party which has been in power from 1961. It means there is an invisible hand. You may be seeing the presidents changing. For example, when you see Samia, when was being sworn in, she was being sworn in from a military barracks. You get it? Now, this is beyond someone you may see as a president. There may be certain powers which decide what has to be done, because now you're having an army. You see, in Uganda, you may have an army. You have the president who is in charge of that army. Now, in countries like Tanzania, where you're having presidents changing and changing, the army may be more stronger than actually the president. So there are some decisions which can't be taken by the president. Now, for example, we've been having the swearing in of presidents in Tanzania since memorial, when they're being done from stadiums, big stadiums. For the first time, we had one from an army barracks. Now, a president was won by 98%, being sworn in from an army barracks, when even the people who have voted into power, they are not around. It shows there is some big force, which is beyond these normal people who think they have the what? The power. You see, when we are talking about democracy, sometimes we tend to say that democracy is the power of the people, by the people, for the people. And sometimes we forget that we can also apply the animal farm philosophy, that all animals are equal, but other animals are more equal than others. So when it comes to democracy, when you say it is for the people, by the people, there are certain people. You get it? Because regardless of any country, democracy has never meant that everyone has that power to say whatever you want. You get it? There are certain people who will be protected. So when you say democracy is by the people, for the people, by what? Now in Tanzania's case, the day of voting, you had the voter turn-up being low because the riots started as they started voting, as early as 11. But if you go by what Magufuli got, the number of people who voted, when it comes to Samia, there are actually more people who voted. Then you wonder why people were rioting, but you have more number of people who voted. Meaning it was already preset. Now in Tanzanian constitution, once a president is sworn in or already declared, you can't go anywhere to go against that election. You get it? So for Samia, the only important thing was being sworn in. The moment you're sworn in, now she's a full what?
President.
With authority. That means they can do whatever they want. Now when it comes to the young people, that you see the civic space, now when it comes to young people, they have resorted to using of social media and what. Now governments are looking for ways of curbing down the social media presence. That's why when you see in Tanzania, before voting, the social media went off. When Samia was swearing in, it came back. Then after it went off. Though, when it comes to young people, because now in East Africa, 70% of people are actually below 30 years. So they are beyond social media these days. That even when you put it off, actually, you may even turn them to be more idle to come against you. It doesn't mean that when you switch them off, if they can't mobilize, they won't come against you. But for the sake of Tanzania, I think it is a wake-up call for the all East African countries. Because Tanzania has had its general election this year, Uganda will have it in 2026, and Kenya will have it in 2027. That is somehow a security threat to the region. Because that means if Tanzania becomes unstable, it can affect Uganda's election. Because sometimes there is that wave which moves around. For example, you're already having Sudan, which is not stable. You have Southern Sudan, it is Uganda moving to security there. You have Congo. You wouldn't wish to have a Tanzanian border where there is insecurity. Then you also have chaos, because the Kenyan elections, believe it or not, we expect them to be chaotic somehow. For them, they will never end as if things go past by. So you don't wish to have all bordering countries having chaos. That means that's how important we need Tanzania actually stable, not to kick off any wave. But regardless, it doesn't mean that we need to be the young people to be suppressed or people's rights to be suppressed. But on the other hand, as also people they are revolting against everything, they should also put consideration that this is their nation. So whatever they are burning down, it is them to be affected at the end of the day.
Thank you, Hosea. Spoken like a true author. And before you preempt our entire conversation, let me invite Emma to the conversation. Emma, I want us to speak legalities, because I was very curious that a president was sworn in just a day, two, after the president was elected. I know in Uganda we have to wait for a period of about 3 months. There is a lot of time for us to for people to contest the results of elections. But then also we have also seen a nation like Kenya, who we believe is fairly democratic. So where does the judiciary exist in Tanzania's context, especially in terms of elections?
But you see, Nancy, to start with, on your very question of the president being sworn in a few days after the declaration of the results, the answer is one and simple. Because if by their laws, when a result, an election result has been declared, you have no opportunity to try to contest it. So what else would they be waiting for? So that's the best they should do. If we are to end this discussion, our emphasis then would be on the lacuna that could exist in that law, but not the president being sworn in a few days after the results. Because why we usually wait here, in as much as it is also a facade, we are just being hoodwinked of if there are any claims, let them be brought before I hear Supreme Court and the likes. Of course, we know how it is all going to end, but at least there is usually that period in which you can think you are bringing a claim against or a petition from the results. But those, you do not contest it. So why wouldn't the person swear in right there? But again, to make an opinion on the same. Sorry, looks like none of you knows Luganda, but the Baganda have a proverb that akali atabara kali anasigadde waka. The implication then is that the times we as humans think we are secure, which we would call illusion of invulnerability in English, that you might think you are secure because you are Ugandan and this is happening in Tanzania or Kenya, but in actual sense you are not. Because by virtue of your geographical location, but also internet that has made the world a global village, our proximity to what is happening in Tanzania is as close as what would happen in the building next to us. Sure. So that has a ripple effect, what I should call a ripple effect, that what happens in Uganda today, given the fact that technology has made it possible to access information. Information is hard to suffocate today. You can only try so hard to try to suffocate it, but you definitely cannot. You cannot. So this happens, and so the point I'm making is that this should be a matter of concern, not just to those that are direct victims of this, but even us. Because anyway, is it different? If we talk about separation of the fourth estate, that's the media, the social media blackout. Don't these happen? These things happen in our own elections here. So what is so strange about the Tanzanian scenario that we are discussing? The difference is that Ugandan youth are more of cowards as opposed to what is seemingly happening in our neighborhood. But it is the same thing. So I don't see anything strange. I don't know if at this point I've answered your question, or perhaps if you want to frame it better so that I can, or if you should.
No, I believe that you do not believe that there is anything strange in terms of the law, but also you understand Tanzania's law to be set and fixed in a certain type of way, which is what you submitted. Now, for me, I wanted you to discuss the state of democracy in Tanzania in terms of their laws. Do their laws allow for a free and fair democratic, free, fair and credible democratic process?
If I were to ask you a question, in as much as you have immunity since you are the moderator,
Yes.
Where do we have fair laws in this country, in this continent of Africa, or where don't we have fair laws? We have fair laws all through, but the question is on the application of the same. But just my discussion about the same. You see, and I don't know if any of you has the benefit of knowing some bit of the law, but what is called the pure theory of the law, or the Kelsen theory, clearly tells us that the law is a creature of a human being, and that it is a person who holds power at the moment who as well holds the law. And so you choose selectively when to apply it, how to apply it, and on whom to apply it. Simple as that. You will always have the laws. Why do you think that by default today, when you have an ordinary Ugandan who has a lawsuit against a person well connected to the government, we already know the verdict before it is even made? Yet the presumption is that the law should be free and fair. But that is a documentation, that is what exists on paper. But the reality is different. One who holds the law knows how to use it, against whom or for whose benefit to use it, and when to use it. Simple as that. So about, I imagine that just like in Uganda, we have, they also have their laws against how the election should be conducted, the entire procedure, and how the result should be declared. In any case, if you have a very free, transparent, and fair election, why then would it even be contested? It would be useless. So I think that that clause of this election does not, election results don't have to be petitioned, would only make sense on a basis where we know that one who brings a claim is only wasting time because we all understand it was free. But the question to you and I is, was this a free and fair election? Definitely not. But I find it a better position. What's the instance of petitioning and wasting these people's money and in the process of gathering evidence for whose results we all know? In fact, my prayer is that we have the same for Uganda, so that when President Museveni is declared winner, on Monday you iron your shirt, go to work, earn your 1,000. Because what's the instance of giving you false hope that a petition has been brought forward, and what do you expect? You would rather go on, because anyway, that is what we have in Africa. But now the legality of their law, and if they really have a democracy, let us look at the entire process. You see, an election, like I've said before, an election is not an event. It's not a wedding ceremony where you invite people to come and attend and it is slated for 8th or 7th of this month. No, an election is a process. In fact, right now, an election for 2031 should have started already, because it is progressive. It's not something static. So looking at the events that happened before the election, during the election, and prior, you see nothing like democracy. Democracy is a thing that you people just like to mention. For me, I've recently lost kind words for this thing called democracy. And much of my position has been informed by the writings of Yusuf Serunkuma in his book surrounded democracy, free markets, and other new entrapments of neocolonialism. Democracy is a facade. You see, I also saw a quote somewhere on X saying that those that hold power will always emphasize on usage of proper channels and appropriate channels, simply because they know they have control over these so-called proper channels, and they know it will never work. The same applies to democracy. So you have the strongest opposition leader, that is Tin Lusu of Chadema, who towards the election had trumped up charges of treason. The same that is here in Uganda. You have arguably the best opposition leader in this country, basically, who is behind the sales ahead of our 2026 elections. Where is the difference? It is nothing different. It is in the same context. You have this gentleman, Luhaga Mpaji, of Luhaga Mpina of Katwa Zalendo, also one of the strongest opposition parties, who, for him, his party was even completely denied opportunity to participate in elections simply because he refused to sign on, is it the election code of conduct kind of thing. Yeah. So at the end of the day, you have 16 people against Samia Suluhu. But these 16 are the likes of this common man's party here in Uganda. Well, I'm forgetting his name.
Munyagwa.
You have Munyagwa, you have Kasibante, you have, in simple terms, you do not have a Bobby Wine. In such an election, what do you really expect? You have these jokers, the Katumba, or you imagine that they are also in the race. You have this man of political Vundunu Tutu, Magezi. So you can have 100 of those against one person.
But on that note, you see, some of those people are put to validate elections. For example, Samia Suluhu's swearing in, all the opponents were available.
You see now,
so they're just to assert that it was democratic.
Numerically, the facade of democracy still stands that the person was not an opposite. You had a long list of 16 rivals, but are these rivals in actual sense? They are not. So where then is democracy? If you are suppressing because when you have these strongest position leaders out of the race, it means that you have betrayed the hope and dissenting views and choices of thousands of your citizens. At the end of the day, the people that have had hopes in those people and they would have gone to vote simply because those people are in a race are even going to withdraw. What's the essence of me going to vote? In any case, I do not see another person I should vote for. So these people are not going to vote. So if the implication is that you would have about 1 million people voting, just imagine you have about 500,000 of they have the upper say now they are not interested in the voting. So it means you will only have your voters still manipulate a few votes. Why not score the 98? So where then is democracy? Do we see it being practiced? That if democracy demands that there is accountability and transparency and media estate coverage, and then during the voting, media is shut down, it is only put back for you to be declared winner, shut down again, put back for you to make your coronation. That was not even a swearing in, just to be, it was a coronation ceremony and shut down again. Where then is democracy? What is democracy in the first instance? I have said before, and this I'm not about to take my position, that democracy is the biggest scam Africa has had. So at the end of the day is that people lose sense and do not see any impact of democracy. Why then don't they opt for other means of getting closer to power or changing their political landscape if that ballot is not going to make sense? Because it's not something they believe in. That's what our leaders in Africa have showed us. That's why you have people manipulating these election results every time and again. You have people leading for 43 years. You have opposition leaders being imprisoned in Uganda, in Tanzania, in Cameroon, and elsewhere. Same thing. What is democracy? What does it intend to achieve? And if we are to assess its impact, where is the impact of democracy? Why then don't we have an almost approved dictator like it is in Rwanda, but who is who has intention and clear intentions, at least in my understanding, for his country? Why don't we have that instead? Democracy. Just wastage of government resources are here preparing for results. People having hope that they stand a chance to be leaders, only for you to show a dissenting view. The next time you know, your bed is a prison cell. What is democracy? I hope that answers your question of the state of democracy, not just in Tanzania, but in Africa.
Yes, thank you very much, Emma, and very elaborate, but also I think it has sparked our brains into, the real gist of the conversation. So to bring Jackson into the conversation, Jackson, this is what I want to ask, because clearly there is no democracy. But so what is our problem? Is East Africa's challenge today primarily institutional, cultural? Do our politics still treat power as a privilege rather than a issue of public trust?
Thank you so much, my sister Ayot. Allow me to begin by congratulating my dear senior foes who just got done with their UNEB, for getting done their UNEB today upon that great milestone. And of course, to answer your question, I want to let our dear viewers know that Africa's problem for long has actually been creating strong governments or personalities and very weak institutions. You realize we do not have institutions that can actually hold the governments accountable, because the institutions themselves are a mere, enablers, of the aims of those perpetrators, people in power. You see, if you look at, the EC in Tanzania, basically it was operating on the whims of Samia. What he says, it's what they do or whatsoever. And of course, if you look back in 1961, when Julius Kambarage Nyerere was in power, I think he did understand clearly that democracy in itself is a mere smokescreen or a facade, that democracy will not really work for our people entirely. And that is why he actually began by a one-party, a one-party kind of system, or the ujamaa, that Tanzania belonged to a single family, and that everybody in Tanzania was entitled to, the benefits of that one single family. And we've seen this one-party system or whatsoever actually work across the world. If you look like in China, You know, they have got one-party system, you know, socialism, but with Chinese characteristics. And I think that is the best way we can actually now solve our problems, because we've inherited what called democracy from, you know, the Western world, from whatever, and actually democracy is not serving our interests. How I wish that we go back into maybe, because if you look at Uganda and then under Museveni, under one-party system, the movement system, things were a little bit better until he faced the challenge that maybe if you bring in other people, they'll take away the power, and he began serving against the interests of the people. Two, if you look at what's happened in Tanzania, when they opened up a space around 1990s and they brought in other political parties and multi-party system, you know, we saw a lot of criminalities begin to take place. For example, if you look at 2015, Tanzania's problem actually began in 2015 with you know, with the rule of John Pombe Magufuli. That is when Tanzania began, you know, coming into the limelight of those injustices and unfairness in election procedures, and actually became worse in 2020. In that election, it brought in John Pombe Magufuli. We saw an entire, you know, election result of Zanzibar being cut off, was not actually accounted for. So that means that our problem basically is that we've adopted a system called democracy that does not really serve the interests of the people.
Let me ask a question. Let me ask a question. To my understanding, democratic system involves free participation of people, accountability, rule of law for everyone, but also respect for human rights. So is that such a bad thing? Is that something that would not work for Africa?
It would be a good thing entirely if at all our institutions as Africans, Tanzania and of course by extension Africans, were empowered to hold, you know, the people in power accountable.
Would that then be a problem of democracy?
It wouldn't be a problem of democracy as such, but until then we empower our institutions to hold the people in government accountable, democracy will not really be a thing for Africa. Yes. Yes.
Okay, go on, please.
Yes. So yeah, I don't know what the segment of your question was. What was the first segment of your question?
Oh, my question, the one that you were answering before, about give me a second. It was about political institutions and whether they are strong enough to, or whether our problem is political institutions or culture, and how we can make them better. I believe that was the question.
Okay, yeah. So the problem in itself are not the political institutions. The problem in themselves are weak institutions to hold the political institutions accountable. How can we make them better? My friend Kwesigwa is a lawyer. I think we need to review. For example, having Mr. President Museveni running for office and is a serving president. He never stepped down. So how are we going to prevent him from actually influencing, you know, the outcomes of such a result? We're having the president appointing the EC. How are we going to prevent those people from serving his interests? So the question is about the institutions. The political parties are not a problem as such, but the institutions to check and create the balances here and there. That's what I believe.
I think I've just remembered. I think my second question was: do our politics still treat power as a privilege rather than an issue of public trust? That was the second segment of my question.
It is more or less of a privilege. People believe, it is a privilege. Therefore, they believe that, they believe that it's actually more of a privilege, not a trust or a mandate to serve the people. Because look at the channels that some people use to get into power; they are very bad channels. You know, you look at abuse of human rights and a lot more, and it is much more of, you know, a privilege. It's that my time to serve, and therefore let me use this power to enrich myself, not maybe particularly to serve the people.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. Peace. I know it took a long time to come to you. I thought I would chip the lady in to balance the conversation, but you know, I got carried away. So let's talk about human rights. What is the status of human rights in Tanzania right now? Because especially with civil society, but also with the young people and their lives when people are on the streets, because that's an important topic for us. At the end of the day, we need a human needs approach to a lot of these things. What is the status of human rights in Tanzania right now? But also in East Africa generally.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. Your question was, what is the state of human rights in Tanzania and East Africa generally? According to me, whenever there is war or violence or anything that shakes human rights, like human life, not even rights first, but human life, any attempt that threatens human life, then of course we expect it to be at a, we expect to have a highest level of abuse of human rights. I will say, apparently, the level of human rights in East Africa generally is not fairly good. It's not 50-50. It's not balancing anywhere. Reason being, how many lives have we lost in Tanzania as of now?
Reports from yesterday indicated about 700.
Yes, and they said, they were saying they estimate it to be. The actual number is not yet given. But imagine those, okay, let's say that's the actual number of people that have gone. How many have been left hopeless? How many have lost their parents? How many children have lost their parents? How many parents have lost their children? So wherever there is violence of human rights, we expect lives. We expect to lose lives. We expect people to suffer, like becoming homeless. I mean, I believe there are homes that were destroyed, and now these people are living on the streets. When internet is shut down, we expect people to go out, like people access to information is limited. I mean, I'm not only researching about what is happening in my country, but I'm also trying to look at what is happening in other countries. People are losing opportunities just because everyone is thinking that if we cut off internet during these elections, then we shall have blocked these people from tweeting or from talking about whatever is happening in the country. But they forget that there are people who are not so much into politics and they are running their businesses using social media. It's the same thing here in Uganda. There are people that are not so much into politics, but they are so active on social media selling their products. So you are hindering this person, you are denying this person a right to earn a living. Because we also have, besides when you go through as a president, you're still not going to put food on my table. I still have to work hard to earn a living. We see that civil spaces, like most of them were hindered or they were blocked from participating in political areas.
Let's talk about civil liberties and especially human rights defenders, because as I have not seen a lot of communication with human rights defenders from Tanzania. What is the situation there, and are they protected? Because I know that the East African Organization of human rights defenders sent out a message calling for the protection of these people. But the actual thing is we do not know whether or not they are safe. There is no actual communication. Is there anything you've heard around that?
Nancy, if you're a human rights defender and your right to speak has been limited or has been cut off, then it means this person is indirectly telling you you have no right to perform this role here. I mean, if you're going to tell me I fight for the rights of others, but then we are seeing human rights defenders being arrested. We see, I was having a talk with one of a colleague who is a human rights defender in Tanzania, and she was telling me her colleague is missing. So we assume she was adopted. Kidnaps are existing in that situation, in that case. Adoptions, and they always look out for the key people whom to adapt, because these are people that have a strong voice outside there, whom they know that if Nancy speaks, then and a very big number of people are going to follow this person. A very big number of people are going to know what is happening. So she was telling me for 3 days now, and the friend is missing. You get? So when they arrest this person, they're indirectly also trying to warn others to stop what they are doing. So there is no like, the human rights have been highly violated, not only in Tanzania, but I will also say here in Uganda. The same thing applies to Tanzania. Sorry, it applies to Kenya. In Uganda, we have the same thing. You wait, 2026 is coming. You're going to see journalists. We saw what happened in Kawempe. You get? So when such things happen, they're indirectly trying to tell you, don't cover what you're seeing. Don't report. See, but don't say it. So you are hindering or you are violating the human rights, and yet we all know that human rights are a necessity in our lives. So there's no way we are going to live without food, and yet we are in war season. They always tell us in war people die of hunger. Some people don't just die of bullets, but majority die of hunger because there is no food. Others are killed by their own comrades. Reason being, this person has to take you off in order for him to earn something to eat. So really.
Answer, if you allow me a minute just to add on her
please.
point. You see, under the positivist school of thought, the positivists suggest that the law, actual law, is a command backed up by a sanction. In their opinion, the law is incomplete if it is just a statement forbidding you from doing a thing, and it doesn't go ahead to stipulate a punishment or even to enforce it. That's why you have the Constitution giving you given provisions, and you have the Penal Code Act saying that when you steal, here is the punishment. In the absence of that, or if the Constitution only says that and the court doesn't enforce or punish a thief, that law is broken. Yeah. Now, the question you asked her as to whether the CSOs have made a statement or made appearance, it's not just about making a statement. For clarity, I have seen a statement from Amnesty International. Yeah. I have seen a statement from Dictators Union, which many of you like to call African Union. I have seen a statement from HRW, that is the Human Rights Watch, condemning what happened, taking cognizance of what happened and condemning the same. What is condemnation? And when has this not been made? Every time you have such injustices, these useless bodies are always there to condemn. But if you only condemn and speak to a problem, and you are the body that we think you have a little bit of power to enforce a punishment, and you do not, of what impact are you? So yes, the answer is statements have been made by CSOs, self-site organizations, but the question that we need to look into is how important is the statements that have been made. The lady has been sworn in, and tomorrow we are moving on. So it's
thank you very much, Emma, and thank you also, Hosea. But let's go for a break and come back to this very conversation. Yes? Okay. We'll go. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. We'll take a short break and be right back.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. We are still on the Youth Roundtable and we're having this conversation about the status of democracy in East Africa. In the house, I have Kwesigwa Emma, I have Jackson, I have Peace, and I have Hosea. So before we left for the break, we were talking about our regional institutions. So many of the African leaders who make up the AU have already congratulated President Samia on her win. On her win. And on the other hand, we have some Western democracies and institutions like the EU condemning the elections in Tanzania. Kwesigwa Emma, I have two questions. Number one, who should define the credibility of African democracies? And number two, who are we supposed to pay attention to? Is it the Western powers who we know do not have our best interests at heart, or our leaders who have credited President Samia?
None of those. Because, okay, let me go chronologically. What's the first question?
Who should define the credibility of African democracies?
Okay, thank you. Very important for us to be able to understand. You see, the context usually determines a lot and it means a lot. You see, before we rant about democracy, before we demand for it, before we even want it off, of course, from the different and divergent views, the point is, how did democracy come to Africa? What did it intend to achieve? Those two questions are very important to understand. Democracy is an import. We imported it from the people that wanted us to have it. That is for sure. Understanding that many of African countries were under the control of our colonizers. And when they left us with democracy. With an imagination that we are either too stupid or too selfish to be able to continue with our chiefdoms, our kingdoms, and monarchical rule, which is very true that we Africans were very stupid and gullible. That is why you had our own leaders selling our own people in exchange for powder, beads, watches, your people in exchange for a bead and for a wristwatch. Very stupid people, including me as Africans. I don't want to exclude myself. So the imagination then was that we need to have a power above us, and that would be democracy, to check our usage of power, who owns it at what time, and how do they exercise it. Just a little bit of context. In the Magna Carta of, I am forgetting the year, is it 1712? I am forgetting the year, but the Magna Carta.
1213.
1213 or 1215? 12. Okay, whatever they are, but the Magna Carta, when you look at the history of the Magna Carta, the UDHR, that's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, that gives a brief context and history to us to why we have something called the law. These people sat and understood that the human nature and tendency is that when a human being has power, they do not want to let go. And that most times they do not use this power for a broader cause, but for their whims and impulses. What do I want? I want this. How do I achieve it? I have power. So I can kill you, take whatever you hold. Can massacre citizens and have an election in my favor. So these instruments created a basis upon which, because remember, they were being made out of a time where you had monarchical leaderships all over the world, and they had seen that these so-called kings and monarchs have absolute usage of power which was not exercised, which was never going to be good for the world and for humanity. So these had to come in to set a precedent, to limit people's usage of power. So we had that. So the same, that's why you have every country having a constitution. It can be written, constitution, it can be unwritten, whatever the kind of constitution you have. But whatever it is, you have, every country has its laws. What is the intent of the laws? To limit application of power, that you have power. Yes, you're going to lead, but how do you use this power? You have the law guiding you. But the whites understood that we as Africans still riding on our weaknesses and our easy manipulation, democracy was going to be a good instrument to have us in a curtain so as for them to proceed controlling us and having the interests still moving on in our countries. Is that if you have minerals in Congo and you are an America who has interest in those minerals, what tools do you go through? You make sure there is instability in Congo, you make sure people are rioting, you come in as a champion of democracy, so that your tentacles are still in that country. So this democracy, because remember, if we talk about, for example, human rights are universal. If you have a right to life, this does not apply for a Congolese or for a Ugandan or Tanzanian. This is universal. These human rights are universal. So they are matters of interest, not just to citizens of a given country, but to everyone who claims to be democratic. So democracy was just a tool for these people to keep their hidden and invisible hands on us. So they determine how we use it. They'll come under the guise of democracy to overthrow a leader they do not want on charges that there has been a violation of human rights, and they'll get their own puppet who is claimed to be pro-people. But in actual sense, we have pro-people leaders, at least in East Africa. Maybe not so many if we have any. So this thing called democracy, like I've said from the start, I don't find it's a very important, useful concept if it's applied, but we as Africans do not seem to be ready to go under it. I hope I've been so on this. What's the second question? Precisely, I want to be quick on it.
So the first question was who defined the democracy? And then the second question was on, I think you've answered both, was on the hand of the Western powers vis-a-vis the African Union. Though maybe you have not addressed maybe the role African leaders or the AU in itself is supposed to be playing.
African Union is dictators' union, like I said. The solution, by and large, is for us as Africans. Honestly speaking, I do not know if I am just a biased individual, but I seem to immediately lose interest in a leader who seems to have support of any European power. Because, okay, I have read a book called Why Europe Intervenes in Africa by Catherine Gegot. Catherine Gegot is the biggest liar among writers that I have seen. Because she comes and tells us that Europe intervenes in Africa because it has intentions to foster democracy, are here to defend African interests and the likes. But we all know this is not true. After all, she is an Eurocentric writer. This is not true. They have their own agenda. So you cannot expect, it could be the illusion of you crying more than the believed. The Banyankole have a proverb that that if you have a kid and Hosea has more love for the kid as opposed to the mother, there is a likelihood that Hosea wants to eat your kid. So indeed, these people have interest in Africa, not because they like us, we as kids in this context, but because they want to eat us. They want our resources. They have interest in our natural endowments, simply that. So the solution lies with us. It is about us working to our consciousness and chasing anything to do with the European and colonial intervention. Very bad. But again, the question that I will not be able to answer is, what alternative do we have? Yet our own leaders do not have this interest at heart. That one I cannot answer honestly. In my small capacity, I have no solution. These people are better, many of them are pundits and ideologues. They can better answer that question. For me, I'm unable to. Our own leaders do not have nationalistic interests, but how much net worth do I have during my tenure as president? So what are we for the gods? What next? The unanswered question is, what next for us? But the interest, whatever the means and the time, must be with us. You cannot expect an imported solution the same way you had imported democracy.
Thank you very much for that submission. Hosea, are you an ideologue?
I'm a person who believes in harsh reality. In the break, I was telling the council that I'm a person who believes in harsh reality.
Okay, let us try to use your version of harsh realities to answer some of our questions. So in Kenya, when we lost the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, many of the Kenyans celebrated him for bringing to the country peace and some sort of a broad-based government. In Kenya, you know, for them they have rooms for handshakes, they have rooms for resolving conflicts with signatures, papers, and all that stuff. So what would a broad-based government look like if it was applied in Tanzania or Uganda, for that matter?
You see, in harsh reality, as I've said,
yes,
in Kenya, they run their politics around some tribes. Actually, not all over them, because there are other tribes, but there are a few which are recognized. A few. So when they are even dividing their what to take and what to take, they go under that. Now in Uganda, you're having more than 50 tribes in Uganda. Now, trust me, whenever we want to apply what is happening in Kenya, like sharing the cake, the national cake, we bring it here. It even becomes worse. That is why you're having ministers who are more than 100, because you're trying to please every tribe to be there thinking that they are part of the national cake.
Yeah.
Yet in reality, actually, these are the people you'll find someone, I don't want to sound bad, but they'll get a minister of Karamoja, or a minister for Karamoja affairs, who is staying in Nigeria always. Now you wonder, this person is for Karamoja affairs, but is ever staying in Nigeria. Then that means they are just enriching individuals. You get it? So we have even where MPs are campaigning and they are showing their voters, if you vote me, I will be a minister. You get it? Now, that is how we are talking about the national cake. Now, when we're having the speaker, that race, then actually, if you fall back now in Ugandan politics, there's a time when the northern part of Uganda was not part of the national cake. No, because they were opposing the government like nothing. But now when you see the Chief Justice, from top now, the Minister of Justice, you get it? Now that's what we're calling sharing the national cake. Now when we're having the speaker race, Anita Mongo was saying, no, the Easterners, forgetting the last speaker was also from the East. So there's a way we're trying to tribalize everything around the national cake. Now, if you go to Kenyan politics, regardless of what we are thinking that they are changing what and what, there are these people, because Odinga's father was also fighting with Kenyatta's father. So literally, these are same families for all of a period of time. Which are, because even when Ruto was coming into power saying, we are taking away the dynasties. People have been in power, controlling it for a long time. Now in Uganda, do we have dynasties? It may be hard to explain. Because literally we have had one president for some good years. The handshake, we can have a simple example of handshake. Mama Mbaba opposed the government and after is back into the government. But that is not too big. but literally also opposing someone for a long time, you tend to lose also interest. You get it? Because being in opposition for some good time, you realize that when Mao was opposing the government for some good time, there are some things he didn't have access to. But now, after joining the government, he has access to some things. So politics, the dynamics of politics always, it depends on the environment where it is. And that is why when Council was saying, there's the first submission, when Council said that maybe Ugandans are cowards, I just laughed. I said, no, Ugandans are not cowards. Because by East African history, maybe we have had more army, like changing government by gun, more than any East African country. Literally, the Tanzanian government, if people looked back, they may think Tanzanians are cowards until recently. So you can't say Ugandans are cowards. And you know, sometimes these revolts are brought up by the government itself. When you close all the doors for people to talk, to speak, then you get the elites, you buy them off, you leave the community with nothing else but to believe whatever comes. For example, if you go to a hospital and the hospital doesn't have surgeons around, and an askari is willing to help this lady to deliver, we may not ask for the qualification of the askari. We are interested in delivering the baby. That's now what is happening in most of East African countries. People are no longer questioning who is coming into power. They're just interested in change of power. But now, sometimes we forget that there is a change which may come and has effects. But now, because I've told you, if the surgeon is not around at the hospital, we don't want to discuss the qualifications of an askari. So it is about the governments which are in power to create that room. Now, for example, I was saying in Sudan, the lady who led that revolution to take off Bashir, if comes back, may have another mindset. That was it worth? Because for now, it is even worse. Because most times when we are asking for these democratic tendencies, we'll be like, we need changing this. There are some people having interests we don't know. And we are playing according to their interests. And once you remove what may seem to be powerful, they come into play. You get it? Now, to go back to democracy a bit, I'm a person who doesn't believe that a developing country needs a lot of democracy. You may need some bit of dictatorship. You get it? Because if you want everyone's say, when you want to develop, then everyone's say may not be necessary. At times you need to be a dictator to tell people, no, this is what we want. For example, you see, Winnie Byanyima was trying to appreciate Museveni in his campaign against HIV and what. And people were saying, how do you appreciate a person who has put your husband in prison? And I was like, no, but that happened. But how Museveni went about that, it was him accepting and saying, we have a challenge. How do we go about this challenge? When his neighbors were saying, we don't have this challenge. So sometimes you need to, you see, when you're a leader, there is a vision you may have when others don't have, and you may have to bring that hand. So democracy, bit in its concept, I would believe that also the young people, on the other hand, should be responsible for whatever they are arguing for. As you're saying, you have your right to say whatever you want. Do you know the impact of what you're saying? Do you know the impact of whatever you're trying to chase? Now, back to your thing of sharing, we are sharing and what? Now, of recent, we have the youth minister. I don't know how old is he? Mr. Balam is in 40 years and above. Now, the question is he for the interest of the youth? Because for the youth, maybe our democracy will be about listening to what we want and putting our ideas into play. But now, if you go around, you'll see that we have MPs, youth MPs. But if I ask you, any youth MP who has ever listened to you or has ever worked for you, things differ. Most times when youth MPs are elected, they will turn that term to go and concentrate in their home area so that they will stand as MPs of their home. So they will get all those resources back to their home area. Now, at the end of the day, there's no like broad-based that we are all on the table of sharing. And what you call the table of sharing sometimes is about me benefiting, not all of us benefiting. Because most times when someone is saying we need to be part of the government, we need to be part of sharing and what, literally is just fearing to say, I want to be part of the bread. You see, you get it? Because you will find it that most of people, we have even had human rights activists. Things change when some bread passes. You see, sometimes you see human rights are like poverty. You see, when you're poor, you may not know your other behaviors until you can afford. So most times human rights, when talking about human rights, we tend to think that maybe East African countries don't have human rights. Yet we are in this same panel discussing the same people we think they are dictators. And even walk back home and you sleep. You get it? So sometimes, as the other man said, that whoever holds power. So human rights also tend whom you've said your words against who. Do your words also hold water against that person? Because you can come here and abuse the president, whatever you want, and nothing will happen. You can come here and abuse the speaker, nothing will happen. Until you say something of interest. But it is not only about Uganda or Africa. It goes even European countries, once you say something of interest. So we are not bad off. Yeah, I believe we are not bad off. The only thing I blame the president of Uganda is that he should decide whether he's democratic or he's choosing to take the dictatorship route. Because at times he tends to be democratic, because believe it or not, because democracy has forms. You will have representative where you vote your MPs, your councillors, and what. Because that is not the president's role. You can't vote your councillor, you vote your MPs, that is representative. The difference between maybe Kenya and Uganda, that for them they have been having the participatory. They participate, it is beyond voting. They will vote, but they will even assert. In Uganda, we representative format. You can't vote your MP, then you
watch.
So after voting, you can sit. We don't participate in after what happens. Because it would have been that after you voting your councillor, after you voting your MP, do you follow up? You get it? But we have this stature that you vote, wait for 5 years, question them. You get it? Now the president also sometimes confuses us. He will be hard-headed on some things. You'll see maybe they have gotten some people in corruption scandals already. Then where other things then it starts, okay, as long as you're stealing and you're investing here, then this is not a dictator, this is not a democrat. The fact that we're going to an election proves that the president is a democratic president. A democratic a bit. He wants you to go into an election. As you said, even gives you the gap of you go to court and do what and what. But as I've told you that the geopolitics comes into play. Do you think in the East African region, you're having unstable Sudan? Southern Sudan is on the verge. Tanzania is there. Kenya, we're expecting conflict. Congo is not there. Do you think the geopolitics, or even the Western countries people believe in, would want a change of government in Uganda? That is impossible. That is why even the president now is going to be the person who is negotiating for Sudan. This is the person of the non-allied movement, which his term is ending even beyond his term in office of Uganda. So, literally, by virtue of things, this is the person who has even extended his term. You get it? Now, when you talk about Uganda, you have the protest vote and what. Protest vote, yes. Because I don't want people to say that they shouldn't vote. But as you've said, once you say something, what comes after? After voting, what next?
Yeah.
You get it? In Kenya, they will vote. Maybe there will be change of power, which we want. You get it? Now in Uganda, you want change of power to what? Because at the end of the day, the commander-in-chief is the son to the president. So facing the harsh reality, is he going to salute the person who is opposing his father? So the Electoral Commission chairperson is a cadre of NRM. That judge was a cadre of NRM. So some of these things, democracy has to come from far. But I tell people the truth is, all developing countries which developed never had that bit of democracy as people want it. And so I would ask the president, since he's coming again, please decide where you fall. Either you're a dictator or you're democratic. For me, I would believe maybe if you be a little bit hard-hardened, though sometimes until they reach you, that is when you believe that you need your rights.
Thank you very much, Hosea. There's a statement that always rings in my head every time we have this conversation, that your voice doesn't matter only when you start to make a difference. You can speak, but when you begin to make a difference, the crackdown will come. Jackson, you know, we've talked about these governance things, EU, what, and, you know, the conversation has been a little far from us. Let's talk about now the youth. You know, many people say the youth don't care about issues of governance. And then other people come back and say the youth are too radical, that there is no need to riot, to do this. So where should we start? How best can the youth actually fight for the changes that they need, or advocate for the type of changes they need in any society, be it in Uganda, be it in Kenya? Because Kenyan youth were too radical. You know, every time they were even posts on social media saying that that they will come and riot for us and help us vote in Uganda because we are not doing enough. And on the other hand, they were saying Tanzanian youth were too mellow now until this event. So what can young people do?
No, thank you. First of all, what happened in Tanzania was very unfortunate, that the people's voices were not heard. And actually, we saw that the results are anti-people. And that is why you saw the youth or the young people rising up to say, no, we are contesting these ideas. For long, we've seen or known Tanzania to be, a classroom for democracy, in quotes, because we've been hearing it in news anyway, for any case. But I'm so happy that the young people across Africa, maybe particularly in Tanzania, have come to understand that the people who should assume offices should be a true representation of their choices, and not a mere imposition, maybe by some deep state or some other hidden hand. And it's very important, and that should be a lesson across Africa, that if at all, the people assuming offices are not a representation of the people we do believe in, then we should actually rise up and oppose. To me, I do not believe that we should have a kind of apathy, withdraw, to say that, for me, those things don't concern me. For as long as I'm working, for as long as I can afford a loaf of bread in a day. Leadership is a public good.
Yeah.
You see that? If at all, if you don't mind about who you put in office, then you don't care about your brother to a larger extent. I really want to say that last time we saw on X or TikTok, whatever, the young people in Kenya wanted to cross over to go and help the Tanzanians to riot. That was interesting, but of course, if at all you want to go and help a neighbor, and then the neighbors will also dictate how this will be helped. Don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to help so and so. So that was interesting. So to the question of the young people, I'm very excited that our generation is trying to understand its unique agenda. The agenda that we must be governed on the terms that really, that are favorable. And if we are to go to office, there must be a representation of who we choose. Look at the eras of the Museveni. Museveni went to Bush because, even election that he contested, I don't think was the second. Which person was he? He was number 5.
It was not even number 5. The man lost completely.
The man lost completely. But you see, because of the circumstances, and then the man picked arms, mobilized, and went to the bush. So the young people now, we have got a responsibility to demand for what is right. And of course, there's a common saying that it doesn't go wrong. It always starts wrong. I think, Samia Suluhu Hassan, Her Excellency, elect in courts, I think picked the wrong lessons. If you look at the person he succeeded, may he so rest in peace, John Pombe. The manner in which John Pombe actually assumed office was a questionable one. If you look at the elections, in how he assumed office, because before then, there are no questions on the democracy in Tanzania until John Pombe Magufuli, his rest in peace, came to office. So I'm saying that that never went wrong. Actually, the lessons speak to were wrong lessons. And I think that is how she has come to believe that if you want to sustain power, then you must do anti-democratic, things to sustain the power. So you can see the things like restriction of media. I think that happened during the time of John Pombe. If you look at whatever is happening today, election violence is here and there. So what do we need to do? One, we need to, as young people, we need to advocate or push for, participation, full participation. Not just mere casting a vote, then tomorrow you're back to Chikuvo. If I give you power, therefore I must also have the responsibility to question how you use the power. And that's a lesson we should learn from Tanzania and across Africa. We must learn that we should not stop at giving out power. We should go to the extra mile of questioning how the power is used. For example, if you look at our public spaces, or per se, maybe where we do work, you are entrusted in the mandate to serve, people. And at the end of the day, you are accountable. You have got someone you report to. Our leaders must be able to report to us. And even whereby they can't report to us, we must be able to have the responsibility to question them. That we saw money being passed, money being allocated for this road. Where is the money? Hold your leaders accountable. That's a lesson we are learning here. I want to thank the youth of Tanzania. Much as Samia Suluhu's excellence has been sworn in, but they should keep demanding. We saw what happened in Kenya. The youth, the Gen Z, kept demanding until something was done. So we should keep demanding until something happens. The faithful and the religious, the Christians, say pray until something happens. The young people should press until they achieve their version of democracy. Their version of democracy. Democracy may vary from context to context, but their version of democracy. But to a larger extent, I do agree with the panelists right here that democracy is an alien to us. And one may actually want to believe that democracy in itself is actually a means that is used by people who impose it on us to achieve their selfish interests here. And therefore we must now have a question or time to begin questioning the kind of democracy that befits our context. The democracy in Uganda may vary from one in Tanzania, from Kenya. So all of us must wake up and begin questioning or demanding for the kind of democracy that favors us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jackson. And now, as we come, of course, to the end of the show, I would like to ask you, please, to tell us what lessons should women leaders pick from the president of Tanzania. You know, very often as women, we've come and said, you know what, women are more empathetic and all those things. And right now people are saying, look at what a woman has done. So what, and this is not me saying that dictatorship is a character for women leaders. Absolutely not. We know that it cuts across and we know it's a general problem for all of us. But what lessons can women leaders like yourself and myself pick from this scenario?
It's a bit a tricky question, but I will say, looking at what the president of Tanzania is as of now, because as of now people are looking at her with this other image of more of a man and not a woman, more of a man and not of a mother, because according to the situation according to what happened in Tanzania, no mother would accept to see bloodshed when she can control it, or especially when she can avoid it. No mother would accept to see young boys and girls being jailed when actually she knows she's maybe the cause of this. A mother would always try to solve the problem. How would it say that you solve that problem? Because mothers are believed to see from far. So we believe that as a mother, she would have avoided all that. I don't think we should say she's stepping down. The party would have insisted on her coming out.
That's what we're saying. Would a politician, though?
Yes, much as you're a politician, but I believe being a politician does not take away that motherhood heart in you. We've seen women who are so radical, but they always have that motherly spirit inside them, that at a certain point, they feel bad for what has happened, they shed tears, and, you know, they pamper where need be. So what lessons do women leaders pick from that scenario? According to me, the first lesson is they will call for reconciliation, peace and reconciliation as a woman leader. Where you see any conflict or any dispute, you have to come in and reconcile. I believe she would have sat on the table, negotiated with these people, and have found a proper way of harmonizing everything than causing bloodshed, jailing people, abductions, and all that. Women leaders can, because that's not what she did. She didn't bring peace and reconciliation, rather war. Then the other thing is, I'm thinking women leaders should come out and, I don't know that it's the right time for them to come out, but either they would have come out before or now, but they would have come out to, there is a way they call it, you sit together and find a solution to the problem. And I don't know how they call it. I'm forgetting how it's called. But it's a way of trying to avoid whatever would happen and that would cause chaos. In Uganda, I can give an example of when we were having the Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga and the Right Honorable Speaker Amongi battling. You see, these are both mothers. We look at them as mothers. The president asked them to sit and talk, but they refused. You get, yeah? So it's the same thing. What I'm trying to say is the president of Tanzania would have looked at a better way of meeting the rivals, negotiate and agree on what better ways they can have peace in their country. But these are things that she didn't do. So as women leaders, instead of waiting for bloodshed, we are expected to be the mothers of this nation. So we are expected to nurture and not to destroy. Instead of destroying, you have to find a way of building it up rather than breaking.
Thank you, Peace. Thank you very much, Peace.
I think a little bit on that.
Yes.
I don't think in the political offices, for me, I think when it comes to political offices, gender may not matter a lot. It is more of your character.
Yes.
Because your character is beyond your gender.
That's right.
Because you see, regardless you're a woman or you're a man, your character matters a lot when it comes to leadership.
Yeah.
Because when you start saying it's a lady, what sometimes we may be a bit like weakening them.
Yeah.
Yet they are leaders because it is the character which comes into play. Because if someone's character is a corrupt person, regardless is a man or a female, it will happen. Because if you remember, Honorable Miriam Matembe recently was complaining when this saga of having the most corrupt parliament headed by
a woman.
And she was saying that I was fighting for women to come on, but now see what is happening. But I think it is more of the character. It is beyond the gender who is in power, but it is the character of that person who comes into power. So the president of Tanzania, I don't think some things are beyond saying you're a mother and what. This is a state. It has to be handled as a state. So the character comes in. So whatever, even if it was Pombe Magufuli, because even in Pombe Magufuli's time, there are people who died.
Yeah, sure.
So it is more of a character of
the
a
character,
person.
yeah.
It is not about the gender. So to me, it is about the character.
Thank you very much. And we have come to the end of this conversation. I would like to, give a shout out to all of you who came in to give in your insightful opinions and for sharing extensively, but also for continuing this conversation as young people. I advise all our viewers to give us their opinions, to like, subscribe, and continue commenting. This has been the Youth Roundtable. My name is Nancy Caroline Ayot, been your host. Thank you and goodbye.